Hello, my name is Mike Hayes. I'm the editor of Construction Europe magazine. This webinar is actually a sort of a joint venture, if you like, between Construction Europe and International Construction magazine. It'll be about 45 minutes, give or take. And during that time, hopefully, we will get a deeper understanding of what the digital transformation of construction actually is. A couple of pieces of housekeeping before we introduce the panel. Firstly, if you would like to ask a question, please do. You have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Click the button, type your question, and I will try and get to as many of them as I possibly can. And the other thing I must do before we start is thank our sponsors for today's event. We have Trimble, Smart Construction, Czech Mobile, and Septentrio, and we are very grateful for their generous sponsorship of this event. Okay, so now, as I said, we have a wonderful panel this afternoon, and in case you don't believe me, I just need to click a couple of buttons, and hopefully now you can see them in all their glory. We are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Jan Mischke, partner with the global consultancy McKinsey and Company. We have Per Boström, who is the Chief Information Officer with the multinational contractor Skanska, and we have Cervero, who is the Senior VP for Technology and Revenue Creation at the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I hope you can all hear me, and we can see you. Jan, I think you might need to unmute. Brilliant. And you do need to unmute, because I think, Jan, I'm going to come to you with the first question. McKinsey has obviously done a lot of research into exactly what this webinar is about, which is the digital transformation of construction. So in a nutshell and in practical terms, could you tell us exactly what that is?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of facets that you need to cover if you want to digitally transform your contracting business. And it's also a wide variety depending on your starting point. If I think about like Per and Skanska, then there might be well beyond the kind of stage that we are seeing among many even mid-sized and large clients, where it really starts with building some of the basics. So building a decent ERP and BIM system as the backbone and some common databases. To then eventually have the real functionality that adds value, whether that's in cost estimation, whether that's in HR, whether that's in on-site management and procurement and the like. And some of the kind of maybe the challenges that we see in this transformation is that many companies we see actually make this big, gigantic investments into 3-5 year programs to do all this big IT backbone. And then 5 years later, when it goes live, they realize they have now cemented the processes of 5 years ago, and they have created a new tool that no one wants to use because it's big and complex. So what we are finding usually more practical is to think business back, think about certain use cases where you have particular deficiencies in your company and where there's real appetite to actually adopt whatever solution you can implement in an agile sprint and bring to market within weeks rather than years.
Right, that's interesting. And Per, coming to you, Skanska obviously has a number of digital innovations which you utilize in your construction processes. Do you think that the technology that's available to you today is making a significant difference to your bottom line?
Yes, I mean, if you mean available on the market, probably the answer would be yes. But I would say that our adoption of the technology, I mean, we are not really there yet. I mean, if you talk about efficiency, of course, I mean, we have become, I mean, by using modern technology, I mean, we are a lot more efficient today than we were a couple of years ago, but we still have a long way to go. So if it has an impact on our bottom line, to some extent, yes, but potentially, I mean, there's so much more to do. So we've just, I mean, basically started, I would say.
So are you saying that Skanska itself, you feel is sort of behind the curve, along with pretty much the rest of the industry in terms of using this technology to up your levels of productivity?
Yeah, I mean, we, what I meant was we have the availability is there for in some areas, but we haven't not maybe matured in that way in adopting the technology in that way. But we are certainly getting there, and I think that is along with the rest of the industry. I mean, we have been behind many other industries, but I think we are catching up now, and I think a lot of our partners. I mean, if you look in the IT technology partners we have, I mean, I think they realize the potential, and they have been for some years. So we are getting a lot more support, and we are working much more closely with them today than we used to. So I think what we see, I mean, products becoming available on the market is so much more usable for us as an industry than they were a few years ago. So a lot of things are happening in the marketplace, and we are doing our best to adopt it, of course.
Sure. And coming to you, Al, I mean, do you get a sense that the latest construction technology is now at a position where it can make itself a good case for itself in terms of the return on investment?
I do, but I think the amount of communication and education that needs to be done to achieve the adoption rate that many of our members feel need to happen. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands, million machines connected out there. The usage is still primarily location, to some degree fuel. I mean, we did during ConExpo, ConAg, and right before, we did about 750 people research on the topic as far as where the adoption is. Then we did another 750 on site at ConExpo, and then some focus groups. And you know, the adoption for certain types of product is pretty good. Machine control is is a pretty good ramp up. Connected machines is there, but the use of telematics is really not significant. Neither is any of the autonomous stuff is not really significant, nor frankly any of the electrics that are coming out.
That's interesting. I mean, Per, do you get this sense then that there's a lot of technology there that can be adopted? Is the case for it more about productivity and efficiency and a reduction of waste than it is about bottom line today?
Yeah, but I think they are both connected, of course. I mean, if you talk about bottom line, I mean, there is, you might not be what you see in the first phase when you're adopting new technology and new solutions, but certainly that's a part of the game if you're in a decentralized world, as I think we are. I mean, each of the building sites or projects, I mean, they look on their bottom line, of course. So it needs to be quick payoff on the investments from their side. I mean, it's a different story when you talk about investments that's done centrally in sort of moving new technology out across the whole field. But if you look on individual products and short term and increasing and adding to the bottom line, it must be a short payoff time and very visible.
Right.
Yeah, you know, Per, I think you're right on. The research that we looked at was those that have not really adopted the newer technology today. 49% of them are saying it just costs too much money.
Yeah.
Then when you dig into it, they don't really understand where some of the costs can be, where they can get into it. But the other, I would say the other big one was 49% say they just don't have the people to implement it. Yeah. And that I think is going to be one of the challenges as we go forward. That's why I said communications, education, awareness, really needs to get out there.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to come back to that, the question of the skill shortage in the industry later. But Jan, if I could turn to you for a moment. You've recently released a report, as I said earlier. Digital technology is a lot of what you research and analyze. And recently released a report. Could you tell me about where digital technology stands in that report, in your findings?
Yeah, so we released a report on the next normal in construction. Like, what is now that we are emerging from the crisis and thinking kind of ahead of where we want to steer our companies to, and what are the bold strategic decisions we need to make after the firefighting? What will this industry look like 5, 10, 15 years out? And what we are finding is that there's kind of finally an overdue wholesale transformation ahead. Where some of those struggles, like Per mentioned, like you need the quick payback because on each project you only have a certain budget and so on, that those dynamics finally need to change and will change, that we actually think about a portfolio of projects, or rather products, and can start to standardize, have repeatability, have productization and so on in. And that's what we see emerging. So really a transformation like in other industries, where we move much more to products, like selling a hospital or selling a high value apartment, rather than selling carpenter hours. That we see, in order to make that happen, much more control of the value chain, vertical integration end to end, much more specialization of players, and importantly also consolidation, so that companies finally get the scale where they can make the requisite investments into digital, where they can attract the talent, where they can invest into production facilities and plants and R&D and so on. And the role of digital in this is huge. It's really huge. It cannot be overestimated, and it really starts from applying BIM models and developing digital twins early on that have all the benefits that are always discussed, but that actually also change the value chain dynamics. It changes when in the process and the value chain decisions are made. And it's much earlier in the process and much more driven by the developers rather than the specialized trade subcontractors. And it continues then to digital libraries, object and design libraries, which together with automated parametric design completely change the dynamics of engineering, with the risk of commoditization or an upside of repeatability, standardization, and optimization over time, and industry learning curves finally coming through. And it doesn't stop there. So it goes to digital sales and logistics platforms that completely may disintermediate the traditional distributor role, and turn them into digital logistics hubs, those who are successful, and actually drive the other ones out of business. And it stretches into prefabrication, where Industry 4.0 technologies finally allow lot sizes of 1 to be mass efficient, or as efficient as mass production. So we can now get the aesthetic quality and so on that we want, and the variability and design that we want, but still build in a factory. And all the way even to contracting, where the de-risking based on digital twins commoditizes part of the contractor role, which is risk management. And where also the digital transformation that requires so much higher investments will trigger a new wave of consolidation.
Yeah, that's great, and I can see that, that there's a certain amount of excitement about what this digital technology can do in construction. From a contractor's perspective, Per, a lot of people have said about the likes of BIM and digital twins, which are really at the backbone of this, that they work wonderfully well at the design and preparation end of a project. But when it comes to the feet on the ground, the people in the field, does that technology arrive there, or is it literally just at the moment stuck at the beginning of a project?
It depends. I mean, I think it's really, I mean, it has arrived. I mean, I think it generates a lot of value throughout the process, even out in the actual more operating part of our process. But of course, I mean, it's not always the technology that is preventing us from making more value throughout the whole chain in the process. It's also, I mean, how we actually are using the BIM models. I mean, how much in detail do we actually spend and develop those models? I mean, because if we do, and it's so much more easy to use them in an operative way when it comes, I mean, at the end of our processes, if you have spent more time in being more detailed, being more thoroughly designing your things. And I'm not saying that that doesn't happen, but it certainly doesn't happen all the time. So to some extent, we are not utilizing the technology in the way we could. But it's also, I mean, but even so, I mean, it's also about integration. I mean, because I mean, we are not only using, I mean, we're using a number of different tools. I mean, when it gets to the later parts in the production process, and of course, I mean, they need to be, I mean, very tightly integrated through our BIM models in order to be usable, and that's not something that we see also in well, in every area. So there's a lot to do with that. I mean, to have more of a holistic view when we integrate our software in order to get, I mean, value not only in the early phases.
Yeah. And do you get that same sense when you're talking to contractors doing your research that a lot of this technology is front loaded on a project and not so much as we run through to the actual building process?
Yes, I think there's also a few tools that are more backloaded, if you will, like some of the computer vision used for as-built versus as-planned comparisons and so on. But I think the key issue is that there's all those interface losses and frictions. Like some designer might do a great BIM model in 3D, 5D, or whatever D. And then the subcontractor doing the electricity sends the file to a printer, gives it to the staff on site, and there you go. And this is exactly one of the reasons why we think this transformation actually requires much more value chain integration, either in kind of long-term partnerships or with actual M&A transactions to be happening. It's just, in the end, maybe 20, 30 years out, we might go to a sliced approach again, because then everyone has scale and can be super efficient like in other industries. But to make the innovation and transition happen, it just doesn't work with this current level of fragmentation.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Al, to come back to you and this question of the skills shortage, which we're seeing in many parts of the world. Are you getting a sense that equipment manufacturers are taking, not taking advantage, but putting this into their business strategies, that the skills shortages requires more technology within the equipment to sort of bridge that gap between the aging workforce moving out and the millennials coming in?
You know, yes, the answer is yes. The challenge is back to adoption. The technology is there for repetitive things, autonomous as an example. I know we have Skanska on the line, but Mortensen did a great project with windmills in a rural area, and literally had a excavator dig all 200 holes pretty much on their own. So the technology is there today. I think it's, again, an adoption issue. Frankly, on the workforce side, the most exciting thing I see is the potential for a new workforce with remote operation. If you think about somebody that is disadvantaged and can't walk, but everything else works, they could be operating from home. So the technology is there, and people just got to get out of the box and figure out how to do it. I mean, connectivity, great example, is a simple thing like telematics, knowing the fuel levels. you don't need that truck running around filling everything up every single day. All they have to do is check which one needs the fill, which of course reduces your time, reduces your people need. And those technologies are there today. It's just the adoption of them that needs to go up. So I think, yes, the manufacturers are providing the tools that the industry can improve their workforce development. And I think we're going to get back to that workforce issue very soon, even though we have significant unemployment around the world because of COVID. So
right. Just quickly, Al, I have a question come in which could be a good one for you. Do you think telematics is being used increasingly with distributors to monitor their customers' machines rather than with contractors?
So I guess I would answer that yes and no. The large the large contractors have really adopted a lot of that, complete fleet monitoring, things of that sort. Smaller folks are not. Once again, the challenge is communicating that the monitoring service, if they catch something ahead of time, is a much cheaper fix than if they're not monitoring it and it fails. Because when it fails, it costs more to fix it. And you don't do it in the timeliness and the time frame that makes a lot of sense. The percentage is not significant at the moment, but it is growing, and it's a great value service. It's just, once again, people don't quite understand that if they're monitoring and fixing it on their schedule and not allowing other parts to break because of a failure, it's actually cheaper in the long run.
Right. Okay, Per, if I could come back to you. Major contractors are potentially using more digital technology than SMEs and subcontractors. Does that become difficult when you're on a major project and you bring in a subcontractor who maybe isn't sort of digitally equipped to the same extent? Obviously, a lot of this digital technology comes down to collaboration. That clearly is going to fall down, isn't it, if you're not all on the same page in terms of the technology?
Yeah, I mean, it can, and it is. I mean, because as you said, I mean, we are on different levels. I mean, different companies, of course. So, but I think in the end, I mean, it's about, when you talk in general, digitalization as a subject. I mean, it's about collaboration. I mean, across and between different types of industries, and of course groups of people and companies. So it can generate some problems, of course, but I think in the way we roll out new solutions and I mean our people, I mean, are so skilled. I mean, so they can really bring and integrate, I mean, those other companies that we collaborate with in a way that it makes it work. But of course, I mean, it can be improved. I mean, when you have more long-term relationship with some companies. But on the other hand, I mean, I think we are learning a lot from our partners as well. So I mean, it's a lot of technology that is being brought in from our different partners. So it's a two-way sharing, I think. So we learn from them and they learn from us, and together, I think we are making it work in a better way, and we are also developing our industry as such.
Is there a particular project in your mind where you can say digital technology really worked for us on that project? That really, that everything came together in the way it should.
I think I mean, it varies. I mean, for certain areas, I mean, it's. As said, I mean, we are in the beginning of we are testing out new areas for new technology and new solutions, and we try to work with the projects that are starting up, our new projects, and because they are more keen to try out new ways of working than maybe a project that's been running for a few years. And we also try to focus on sort of more looking at specific parts of the process instead of trying to say that, okay, now let's try to digitalize the whole patch. So I think we are not there yet. I mean, we are sort of lifting us and becoming more mature in many different areas. But I wouldn't say that we have one sort of edge project where we can see that we've digitalized it in top notch across. I mean, we're not there yet, but hopefully we will. But
how about the project that you're working on with Volvo in terms of the electric construction site? Slightly different thing, but did that kind of technology work well? Was that seen as a big success for you?
Absolutely. I mean, it's very promising, and it's a lot of learnings. I mean, being done in that project, of course. I mean, it's a way of, I mean, to try out new technology in real life, in real projects. That sort of gives a lot of value for us, where we can see, how we can adopt it, the technology, of course. But I think, of course, also for Volvo in this case, they can see it work. I mean, it's not only in theory or in labs. I mean, they can see it in a rough environment. So of course, it generates a lot of positive feedback to be tested. So I think it's a very good example on when collaboration with major partners. I mean, how successful it can be. And I think in many areas, we are looking and trying to make a partnership with companies like Autodesk and Oracle and Microsoft. Those type of companies. It's extremely inspiring for us to get the new edge technology and to try it in real life.
Sure. I mean, it sounds to me, Jan, as though a lot of companies are dipping their toe in the water of digital technology, if you like. But do you think that the situation that we are in today with the COVID-19 pandemic, is that going to accelerate this process? Are companies now going to have to start looking more towards a digital transformation?
Yes. So we actually ran an executive survey roughly a month ago, and about 2/3 of the 100 executives that we asked believe that the crisis is going to accelerate the entire transformation of this industry. And actually a full 60% have raised in their respective companies themselves already the investments in digital and technology. So you see very clear signs there. It's actually also something that we observe across all industries. It's not only construction specific. Digital is going on steroids wherever you go. Companies really see the need. And there's actually maybe two soft factors behind, if I will, that might also kind of work to its benefits and might actually see us finally seeing a productivity acceleration in the sector and even more broadly, which is the speed of change is currently deadline driven. It's like, you gotta change your operations by next week or we'll be closed down. And suddenly something that used to take 2 years of discussions and refinement, and alignment and training and communication and communicating again is happening in a week because it has to. And there's no discussion, it just happens. And it's actually also in some areas encouraging to see how those supposedly low-skilled people where we've been debating for a while, how can we train them up to deal with technology and so on. Suddenly the flower shop around the corner programs their website over a weekend because she has to. And suddenly it's there, the digital skills are there.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Can I quickly ask a few questions? We've got a lot of questions coming in. So I'll ask a few of these, otherwise we just won't have time for them. So One question that's come in is, how big a problem is not having standardization of data, e.g. with telematics or BIM? Anybody fancy that one? No standardization of data.
I would say that, I mean, in all areas, I mean, I think standardization or the lack of standardization, I mean, is a problem. I mean, or it prevents us from getting more value. And I think we need to drive that, I mean, a lot more than we have. So with standardization, I mean, comes value out of our data. And I mean, we are becoming more and more information driven, and so that also, of course, generates and drives the standardization and the need for that.
Sure.
I think, Mike, sorry, Bear.
Go on now.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple pieces to that. We've been working on a variety of standards within the equipment side for some time. We went from 4 pieces of data being communicated in a standard communication line to 21 pieces of data on the telematics side. But we're also finding that even though the data feeds are going into the right columns, so there is a standard, the data is not being necessarily calculated the same way. So the customers are now saying, I'm getting the data in the right file, but it's not the same kind of data I'm getting from here to there. I will say the standard that's being worked on right now will be, I think, a game changer, and that is the interoperability standard, where a machine can actually just go right on site and be communicating immediately with a base station, no matter what brand it is. So I think we got a little bit slowed down. We had hoped to get that released in 2020. A variety of face-to-face meetings that were all scheduled in April didn't happen, but they are doing them virtually later this year. And, we hope that standard will be coming out at then. But the interesting thing is, because of what we learned on the telematics standard, the data is flowing into the right columns and the right files, but the data is not being measured the same way. On the interoperability, I think we're taking a serious look at actually putting them on a site and testing the standards so that the data is being measured and communicated, not just communicated, but measured the same way.
Okay, I have another question here from the audience. I would like to know how additive manufacturing or 3D printing is going to affect digital construction in the future. 3D construction is something we've been talking about for so long and has never really emerged. What do we think? Is that possible?
I'm going to give the other two a chance to really think about this and just give you a quick answer from our standpoint. Obviously, we at ConExpo 2017, we had a 3D printed excavator out at the show. In 2020 at the Tech Experience, we found that the real value end is probably in the pre-construction side or prefabrication side, so that things may get 3D printed and then go on to the site versus the build on the site. So I will let that fall into more of Per and Jan's area.
Yeah, I think more broadly across industries, 3D printing is mostly a technology that is interesting if you have high value products with lot sizes of 1, highly customized. It's not a cost efficient technology for mass production and also not for mass construction, I would argue. But there's application areas. If you need very specific building parts for specific projects, it's very worth it. We also see some pickup in use of the technology, for instance, for facades, so that people get their specific designs and then you roll the facade up on the prefab or traditionally built structure. So there are a couple of areas, and I'm sure it's going to grow. I don't think it will near term replace other methods.
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree with what you say. I mean, I think I mean, seeing what's being done today, I mean, certainly you can see I mean, there's opportunities, I mean, around the prefab and more component-based construction. And in order for that to increase, I mean, 3D printing would be one of the things that we will definitely be generating a lot of value.
Okay, now I've got another question here, which is particularly relevant for today, which is how important will wearables be on the construction site for both productivity and safety, and how quickly do you see them being adopted? I think we already are seeing them being adopted. Jan, have you done any research into wearables?
No, we haven't done specific research, man. I would argue it depends a little bit on how you overall think about construction. If you share my vision that you should actually do most of the complex things somewhere in a fabrication plant, in a safe environment with robots and a number of people controlling the robots, the need for wearables on site massively decreases. But of course, in the current environment where you have to manage sometimes thousands of people from dozens of different companies and contractors and subcontractors, I guess it will help a lot, but Per, you might have more experience there.
Per, in terms of the work that you're doing at the moment, are wearables relevant to you today?
It's hard to say, really. Of course, it's relevant, but I think we'll see how it develops. I mean, it's I don't have a really good answer or a straight answer to that.
I mean, as we said earlier, social distancing will be with us for some time to come. At the moment, are we talking about needing digital technology just to get us back to the productivity levels we were at pre-COVID-19?
Yes, I think we are. I mean, I think looking at the if we are to raise productivity, of course, I mean, we need to become more digital, and but there's also other angles to that. I mean, if you look at, I mean, from a sustainability perspective, I think that's also one thing that is also related to, I mean, that has become more in people's mind, and it certainly has put the environmental issues higher on the agenda. It's been becoming more visible now, certainly after this crisis. So I think that the digital agenda has sort of become more important, even if it were important even before, but it has definitely increased.
Yeah, absolutely. Al, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to add on, you know, we're here in a conversation about digital technology. Per brought up sustainability. The facts are there that if a company adopts a complete IoT, digital connected machinery monitoring, you will lower your carbon footprint just based upon machine usage, you know, in every aspect. And we're actually trying to work with a telecommunications company right now to kind of put some forms around tracking some of this stuff to be able to show that as a contractor, I'm using these connected machines, and this is kind of lowering our carbon footprint by X, Y, and Z. So I think to Per's point, sustainability, I mean, just the fact of using BIM, and the interoperability with connected machines, you're going to reduce your waste, right? Waste contributes to, less waste contributes to sustainability, less fuel, less machine usage, so on and so forth. So I think it all ties together. And of course, in the States, it's less of a high demand that a contractor be more sustainable, but more sustainable is also more profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Al, while we've got you, can't really let you go without asking about the US infrastructure bill and where you see that going at the moment. How much will it be?
I think I said this earlier. $16 trillion. Now, really, there's a couple of things a couple of things that are going on right now. First of all, we have a very unique process in the States. In our highway system is funded by gas tax through Highway Trust Fund, right? And that gets reauthorized technically every 6 years, but some ups and downs on that. That expires September 30th. So that's one thing to look at. The second thing to look at is nobody was driving for 4 months. Nobody was filling their car. Nobody was putting gas in their car. So the funds in the highway trust account, state by state, was significantly reduced, right? So where are the state Department of Transportation funds going to be? So a couple of things are happening right now. One is, I'm not sure if it's finally passed and signed, but they're looking at, the federal is looking at, because the Highway Trust Fund, just so everybody's aware, funds the highway interstate system we have in the United States, but as only a percentage, mostly 90%, and then lower as the roads get off the main thoroughfares. But there's a bill going through Congress right now that the feds will pay 100%, so not to worry about the state piece of that funding. The second piece is that they are having a discussion. Everybody, it's probably one of the only things that the Democratic and Republican parties will agree on is an infrastructure bill, but nobody can get there, right? So the newest number we're talking about is $1 trillion. I would have said it's never going to happen. But there's awful lot of discussion going on about it. There is a September 30th deadline. They do have to do something, if only to do a temporary fix. We hate temporary fixes. We are lobbying no temporary fix because that brings uncertainty. Uncertainty brings no investment, right? So I think time will tell, but there's a lot of good conversation going on. We've spent a lot of money federally on different programs to boost up the economy here in the United States. And there is a lot of good conversation that an infrastructure bill and spending $1 trillion there has a better ROI than just trying to pump more money into the economy. So that's the best answer I can give you.
Good, pretty good, Al. Coming back to this side of the pond, we have obviously the European Green Deal and the drive towards net zero carbon. Do you think European regulations could actually also be a drive towards digital construction in terms of the regulations for sustainability? Yeah?
Yeah, I think so. It would be hard to imagine that respective sustainability requirements would not go up. We actually did a quick survey just last week among top CEOs of top cement companies, and actually 95%, a full 95% believed requirements in terms of sustainability will go up or at least stay the same. So we will very likely see some of that. Digital is one way to get there, replacing or kind of introducing carbon capture and use in cement and so on might be a bigger driver if we're honest to ourselves. But there's also discussions going on at the EU level and different national governments to kind of move construction finally towards digitalization just in its own right. It's a good thing for the industry. And if it's a good thing for the industry, it raises productivity. It's also a good thing to get more affordable housing, more affordable and higher quality infrastructure. So there are kind of all kinds of ways in terms of mandating BIM for public procurement, in terms of demonstration projects for smaller companies to learn, you name it, huh? Big list of things you can do to require the digitization of the sector finally.
Brilliant, brilliant. Great way to finish. And Al, Jan, Per, thank you very much for joining me and making it such an intriguing conversation. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, it just remains for me to say thank you very much for joining in such large numbers. I really do appreciate it. And before I go, I must again thank our sponsors, Trimble, Smart Construction, Check Mobile, and Septentrio for their generous support of this webinar. And we hope we will see you again very soon for the next construction technology webinar from KHL. Thank you and goodbye.